friends, this is Diane from Boho Stamper. Welcome. We continue our 2021 Valentines today with a card panel that I began with this Deco Foil METALLIX embossing gel. I had spread some across a heart stencil that I had onto a piece of basic white and set it aside to dry. I'm going through some of my images that I've previously cut out. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But I like to check out some different stamp sets and find little animals and characters and have those ready. This one from Picket Fence Studios, I just finished by coloring her and adding her to a panel that we created on my Facebook Live this past Monday. I had used a Parisian Sweet stamp set by Stampin Up to create my background, and she turned out really cute. I think she was just waiting for those stamps. So I think I was looking at kittens, but I think I want to use the Inky Antics characters on here. They kind of remind me of Valentines that we used to get in school. The monkey reminds me of I'm Bananas About You. But I think today I'm going to use the lion. I left the panel sit out here from the stamp set so that I could try to match up my Stampin' Blend colors a little bit. I decided on light and dark soft suede and light and dark cinnamon cider. Now Stampin' Blends don't have a light, medium, and dark shade of colors, and we'll address that a little bit later because I do want to add some highlight to my little lion here. So I started out by using my dark soft suede and just outlining and adding some color to where I thought there would be some shadowing. And then filled it in with the light soft suede, blending the two colors together so that there wasn't any distinct line and there was a good transition between the colors. I did speed this up a little bit so that you don't have to be completely bored just sitting there watching somebody color. We're adding the light soft suede here. And then when I was finished with this, I did the same thing with the cinnamon cider. I went back through and used cinnamon cider on his body and his face, using the dark shade to color in where there would be some shadowing, and then just going over everything with the lighter shade to blend them together. When I was all done coloring my lion, I realized that my camera had not been on, so I did a second lion. So when I'm finished here, I'll have two lions that I can use for Valentine's. I'll just have to decide what background I want to use for the other one. And kind of remarkably, they came out very similar. Usually, if I do two images, they look completely different when I'm done, but these two came out pretty close, so I was happy with them. I think he's cute. So here I'm just filling in with the light cinnamon cider Stampin' Blend. And then I'm going to use my color lifter pen, which is also by Stampin' Up. And I'm going to use that to make my highlight areas. While it doesn't necessarily lift the ink, it does push it aside a little bit and is saturated into the paper, so it leaves a lighter color. Another trick to using that lifter is to maybe use it on the image first and then use your color over top of it, and that will help create a lighter color as well. So I'm using that ink lifter pen and moving some of the ink on the tops of his legs and a little bit on the tops of his toes. I'm going to lighten a little bit around his mane and across the bridge of his nose and on the front of his snout where I think there would be some lighter areas. And I want to remind you when you're using alcohol ink to have a paper underneath your image that you're working on, because the alcohol ink does go through to the back and you may not want to get it on your table or whatever other work surface you're using. And if you're going to use the alcohol ink for the inside of your card, you may want to consider doing that on a different panel and then adhering it to the inside of your card so you wouldn't be able to see the back of the characters with the ink showing through. And you'll see that when we go to put the dimensionals on the back of this lion. So still just lightening up a little bit on the bridge of his nose and his cheeks, and we'll lighten up a little bit around his hair. And if you hear some snoring, that's my little critter. Cameron is laying here and she's bored with my editing, so she's decided to take a little snooze. So here we're just adding some highlight to the top of the lion. And when the ink has dried, it does soften the edges even more, and the colors do blend together really nice so that it does look like the character has a lot of shading and shadows to it. So here's my lion from today and the one from earlier in the morning when my camera wasn't on. But he's a cute little fellow, so I'll use him. I had some copper and gold metallic papers die cut with my Stitched So Sweetly dies left over from Christmas. One I had put through an embossing folder, and then I had a couple others left over. I thought that the lion would look great on this metallic paper. So off camera, I trimmed down my heart stenciled panel so that I'd be able to add it to a layer of soft suede, and then added the gold metallic die cut layer. Then I wanted to bring in a little more color, so I chose Lovely Lipstick to create my card base, and I started out with an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock that I cut in half, scored and folded to make a 4.25 by a 5.5 inch card base. And I'm going to use some clear epoxy hearts here. I didn't have any red or pink hearts to add to the front of this, so the epoxy elements are always nice because you can use your alcohol ink markers and make them any color that you want to. I had a couple pink ones on there from an earlier project, but that was Rococo Rose, and I wanted something a little bit brighter for this card, so I just pulled out my Lovely Lipstick Stampin' Blend and made some brighter pink hearts for this. I'm going to use Tombow multi-glue to add my layers together here because I know that I want to use Stampin' Dimensionals to lift the lion up on the front of the card, and I don't want to make the card too thick to put in an envelope to send it. So I'm going to just use my liquid glue then and adhere the soft suede to my Lovely Lipstick card panel. I'm using Lovely Lipstick ink, and I'm going to stamp my greeting on a piece of scrap basic white cardstock. It doesn't have to necessarily be straight or even because I'm going to use the Stitch So Sweetly dies to also cut out a panel for on the front of the card with my greeting. So we'll just get that stamped on here, and then I can pull out my Stampin' Up mini cut and emboss machine and run this through my little mini boss with that Stitch So Sweetly die. The mini cut and emboss machine is a really handy tool to have beside you when you think something up like this at the last minute, like, hey, I'm gonna use the same dies and cut out my greeting. I don't have to go over and get my full-size cut and emboss machine, but do have to take into consideration, because this is smaller, it only handles about a 3.5-inch wide piece of cardstock. Like here, I decided I wanted to add a little bit more of the pink to the front of my card, so I chose the next larger size of my rectangles in the Stitch So Sweetly set, and then just trimmed off a piece of the Lovely Lipstick cardstock and ran that through my baby boss as well. And then I can layer these onto the front of my card. So I can set my embossing machine aside now, and I think I have all of the elements that I need to start putting my card together. I did take a second and put my dies away so that I didn't end up with any more missing items, because I did misplace my stamp with my greeting on it earlier, and it took me forever to find it. It was stuck to the soft suede cardstock wrapper. Thankfully, it was there. I used the stitching on the die cut pieces to help line everything up straight. And the reason I chose to use a liquid glue rather than the tape runner is because that panel that has the gold heart embossing gel on it created texture on that panel. And I'm afraid that when we use just a tape runner, it doesn't adhere very well to that foil, and it doesn't get down inside of the stenciled parts to actually adhere to the cardstock itself. So using a liquid glue just makes that bond a lot stronger. I also like to use liquid glue when I am using metallic paper, just to make sure that everything adheres to that. I think that sometimes my tape runner, if I'm not using the Stampin' Seal Plus, sometimes the tape runner will not stick to foil paper quite as strong as I want it to. So we'll layer this die cut panel on the center of the heart stencils. And then I can add the Lovely Lipstick die cut panel as well. Here I'm just setting my large acrylic block on there to let the glue dry a little bit while I'm figuring out how I'm going to position these last couple of pieces. I don't want my lion's head to go up too high over my greeting, but I want that the metallic paper to show through a little bit. So I've decided that everything's going to fit. Added the pink layer to the gold metallic paper. Now I can add my greeting. I must be really boring. She's sleeping really hard here. That's some loud snoring going on. Good for her. She's a little bit older, so likes to have company beside her all the time. I want to be careful when I lay down my greeting panel here that I have it pretty much where I want it before I press it down, because the liquid glue will leave a little residue on the metallic paper that's very hard to get off. And here you can see on the back of the lion how the alcohol ink does soak through your paper, and that's what you would see on the back of your card should you use your alcohol markers on the inside of your card. I'm adding a lot of Stampin' Dimensionals here because we do have several layers on this card, and with the dimension from the embossing gel, I want to make sure that he's going to stick to everything. Between the foil paper and the embossing gel and the different layers, I just wanted him to make sure he wasn't going anywhere. So I removed the release papers off at the back of the dimensionals and add my lion to the front of the card. And then I can add my epoxy hearts on here. So I like to use my little pokey tool to add the hearts. It just keeps my fingers from blocking my view of how these get adhered, whether I want them on there straight or tilted a little bit. I did decide here at the last minute that I wanted one more small heart with the lovely lipstick, so pulled out my Stampin' Blend and added one more pink one down there on the bottom. And then our little lion Valentine is complete on the front. While I had everything out, I did make an inside panel. And I just wanted a simple stamp that said Happy Valentine's Day. I didn't want anything really mushy or anything because I'm not quite sure who I'll send this one to yet. But I did find a stamp set that I had set aside over here, and it was a Gina K set, and I will try to link all of these products here below. I'm not sure that the stamp sets are all still available. And as I was saying, I like to cut these out ahead of time, and I keep them in a plastic container. And then when we go camping, I'll take them with my Stampin' Blends. And once it gets dark when we're camping, you can't really do too much outside. So I'll sit and color some of my figurines in, or my figures in here for card making. So I got a piece then of basic white cardstock for my inside panel, and I really like the font from this Gina K Happy Valentine's Day stamp, and just use the lovely lipstick to stamp that on the center of my inside panel. And then for a little bit of added interest, I pulled the same heart stencil out that I used on the front of my card, and just using a blending brush and the lovely lipstick ink, I'm going to lightly stencil over top of my inside message here. I don't want it to be very brightly colored, so a lot of the ink I do brush off onto my piece of scrap paper before I start going over the stencil. And I like the way that it turns out with those hearts sort of fading off into the edge of the basic white. So I hope you enjoyed this Valentine and that you are encouraged to create some cards of your very own to send to everybody. And if you have any questions, please email Diane at bohostamper.com and I will be happy to answer any that I can. If you've enjoyed my video, please like below and consider subscribing so that as I add new videos, you will be alerted. Feel free to visit me at bohostamper.com and catch up on all of the latest Stampin' news. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again the next time. Thanks, everybody.